on the 16th of March 1924, the city of Roubaix became the birthplace of Gaston Naessens. In a life spanning almost a full century, he would come to sit alongside Royal Raymond Rife and Anton Priore among the greatest electromagnetic medical researchers history had ever known. At the age of 5, Naessens built a small, motorized vehicle that was powered by a spring from an old alarm clock, in tandem with what he called Meccano. Life took a sad turn for him, however, as his father died when he was only 11 years of age. But it would take a lot more than that to stop him from becoming an inventor. In the years that followed, Naessens engineered a home-built motorcycle. As his ambition grew, he created a mini airplane that could carry him. Whether it was right to or not, his mother burned it one night before he was due to fly it, fearing that it would get him killed. In the 1940s, after graduating from the Collège Universitaire de Marc-en-Borel, Gaston began applying himself to intensive courses in physics, chemistry, and biology at the University of Lille. As he worked, France fell to the Nazis, leading Gaston and many of his classmates to flee to Nice. He lived near professors who had also been evacuated, and was able to obtain a rare diploma from the Union Nationale Scientifique Française, which unfortunately would not stand as a true diploma by the new Republican government set up by Charles de Gaulle. This would cost him over the years, as his diploma was not taken seriously. The following is taken from Christopher Bird's book, The Persecution and Trial of Gaston Naessens. Inspired by the professors that taught him during the war, Naessens began his research into the nature of disease. Being of a rich family, his mother allowed him to set up his own post-war laboratory in his father's home. During his research, Gaston yearned for a microscope that could see further into the blood cells he was studying, so he decided to invent his own microscope known as the somatoscope. In the design of the instrument, Naessens sought technical assistance from German artisans in the village of Wetzlar, Germany. Here a well-known German optician company, Leitz, existed before the war. The artisans helped in checking his original ideas on the arrangements of the lenses and mirrors. The electronic manipulation of the light source itself was entirely Gaston's own idea. Once all aspects of the microscope were fully run through, Naessens was able to get to the body of his new instrument constructed by Barbier Bernard et Tourin, technical specialists and military contractors near Paris. The microscope was known as the somatoscope because of its ability to reveal a somatid, which Naessens defined as the smallest fundamental unit of life, existing between energy and matter, capable of developing into bacteria and linked to disease. This new microscope helped him to develop novel anti-Big C products that had exciting new positive effects. The first was a confection he named GN24, for the initial letters of his first and last names, and for 1924, the year of his birth. Naessens' new product incorporated an anti-fermentive property and was sold in Swiss pharmacies and showed excellent results when administered by doctors to patients with various forms of the Big C. Examples of GN24's success began first in 1949, when the ex-husband of his sister was suffering through a terminal phase of stomach Big C and was forced into early retirement. After receiving GN24, he was able to return to work and had completely recuperated from his afflictions. Another 1949 case came from Germaine Laurel, who was stricken with breast Big C, which had metastasized to her liver. A large lesion had been gouged out of the left side of her chest, causing her to go into a coma. This is when her family reached out to Naessens to beg for treatment, upon completion of which, Germaine recovered her health and never forgot what Naessens represented to her. I do, however, need to make a distinction here. Don't find any of Gaston Naessens' devices and risk your life on it. I'm not seeking to turn people away from following their doctor's advice. Seeking a more imposing weapon against the Big C, Naessens turned to the idea of a serum. He achieved this by hyper-immunizing a large horse by injecting the animal with Big C cell cultures, allowing said horse to produce antibodies in large quantities. Blood taken from the equine contained these antibodies and when purified could fight the disease. It seemed to cause even more positive results than that of the GN24, and led to the restraint or reversal of the disease's progress. not only with tumours, but also treated the blood forms. This is similar to what was done by Andrew C. Ivy and Stephen Jurevich with regards to crybiosine. See our documentary on that to learn more, but again, I'm just recounting what was written. Do not chance your health on any of these devices. The new serum was known as Anablast. One patient, known as Suzanne Montjoint, was treated in 1960 by the Anablast, who had given up on all hope before her treatment. By the time use of Anablast began, she was semi-comatose. Within 4 days, her pains had all but disappeared and she regained consciousness. By April 1962, after an examination of her blood, Naessens declared the somatid cycle of Suzanne's blood had returned to normal. Unfortunately, when all these successful treatments came to the attention of the French medical authorities, Naessens was twice brought to the bar of justice, first for illegal practices of medicine, and the second for illegal practice of pharmacy. On both occasions, he was heavily fined. His laboratory was sealed and most of his equipment confiscated. Luckily, he was able to preserve his microscope. Under the mounting pressure, Gaston left mainland France for Corsica. Here he established a small research laboratory in the village of Brunette. While stationed there, a Scottish Freemason leaked his secrets to the press in Edinburgh. Hundreds of patients were flying to the island's capital of Ajaccio, some from as far away as Czechoslovakia or Argentina, for Naessens' help. In 1964, the French medical authority was continuing with its investigation in Naessens' research, with what they called an instruction or a kind of investigative trial. He was given the opportunity to treat a child in Canada and move there for a short time to try and heal him. Unfortunately, because the French government was in full control of Quebec, they would not let him personally treat or view the blood of the boy, and later he succumbed to the sickness. In spring of 1965, Naessens returned to France for his trial. He was found guilty during May of 1965 and fined the maximum amount possible at the time. When he returned in autumn to Quebec, he retired from the public scene and lived incognito in Oka, a suburb of Montreal. He became friends with Hubert Lamontage, an owner of electronic devices, who he met while looking for electrical composites for his microscope. Naessens became a Mr. Fix-It for some years. In 1971, Naessens had a stroke of luck, perhaps the most important of his career. He was introduced to David Stewart, who was head of the prestigious MacDonald Stewart Foundation, which funded orthodox Big C research. David took Naessens under his wing and saw him for the true genius that he was. He therefore decided to personally support Naessens' projects. After setting up a laboratory for Naessens at the McDonald's tobacco premises, which Stewart owned, the company came under violent criticism, and Naessens was advised by David to move his research to a low-profile provincial retreat. By 1972, Naessens was able to take over a summer house in Rock Forest and established a well-equipped laboratory in its basement. From 1971 to 1984, Naessens continued with his research and treating those with various diseases. In 1984, Naessens was charged with accessory to murder after a woman used his treatment. He was accused of falsely promising to completely cure her, and by offering her a solution, he had turned her away from mainstream treatment and contributed to her death. Forgive my saying, but again, do not risk your health on this. Do not use any of Gaston Naessens' devices in place of following your doctor's advice. On the 13th of December 1984, Luc Gregory, a member of the Quebec Surete, who throughout the trial sat at the prosecutor's table to help him with his documentation, led a search of Naessens' house and laboratory. He was accompanied by 2 investigative commissioners of the medical corporation. The search party was looking for a pair of medical dossiers, the most important one being that of the patient, Madame Langley. This medical dossier was signed by Madame Langley's husband Marcel on the 12th of November 1984. It was this document that the prosecution referred to on multiple occasions during the trial. Naessens was finally arrested and brought to trial in 1989. The prosecution was led by Claude Melancon, and Naessens' defense lawyer was Conrad Chapdelaine. 3 assertions were used by the prosecution in the Madame's dossier found in Naessens' premises. The first key point was that Marcel stated everyone was to address Naessens as Doctor. and my wife and I took this title to mean Doctor of Medicine, and in particular, Big C Specialist. At no time in Naessens' life had he ever allowed himself to be called Doctor. In fact, he would deny anyone calling him that. The second assertion was that Langley stated that he only signed the document because of Naessens' supposed promises. Langley stated, "He promised us that, after the first series of treatment, she would be completely cured." The defence made it clear that Naessens at no time made such a promise to anyone. The third and final assertion in Langley's submission to the medical corporation was that, during the course of Madame Langley's treatment, Naessens kept assuring us that she was making real progress. The defence would ultimately convince the jury that this was a distortion of the truth. The search party that raided Naessens' house and laboratory was after bigger game than just the Langley's dossier. They seized more than 150 additional medical files in Naessens' possession, but to their dismay, they found nothing incriminating and returned them to Naessens a few months later. They also seized 5 vials containing the biologist's 714X product. The wording on the label is important to note as its precise meaning was distorted on the 2nd of June 1989, only a week after Naessens' arrest. Health and Welfare Canada issued the following bulletin. Warning concerning 714X, a fraudulent anti-Big C therapeutic product. The HWC's Office for Protection of Health has today alerted the population to the fact that a product called 714X, an injectable preparation, is offered as an anti-Big C treatment. Anyone who has procured this preparation is advised not to use it and to throw it out forthwith. The HMC went on to list what was printed on the label: 714X, camphorminium chloride, intralymphatic injection, experimental product, for export, but omitted the key phrase, for sole use by the medical corps. This was not the only distortion on the bulletin, which went on to read, according to the laboratory analysis made by the Office for the Protection of Health, 714X contains only camphor and not, as is written on the label, any camphorminium chloride. There is no scientific proof of these chemical products, nor of their effectiveness in Big C treatment. The Office, in collaboration with the Quebec shre, is carrying out an investigation on the fraudulent sale and distribution of the product in question. All persons who have used any 714X should receive appropriate medical care. The prosecution's star witness was a Quebec physician by the name of Lorenzo H. M.D., who had done all his medical studies in English. He revealed to the jury and court that he had no idea what he was talking about. When questioned about lymphatic injections and if they were possible, he firmly asserted,
"Lymph injections is never done in any hospital because it's impossible."
Right then is when H stumbled badly. Naessens' wife responded by saying, "In the light of H's statement, I think things are going very well indeed," meaning of course for her husband Gaston. It wasn't the only time H stumbled. Just as H's testimony was drawing to a close, the prosecutor showed him Langley's medical dossier and drew his attention to the 4th page. She specifically asked him to look at a line reading, "Examination of somatids in blood." The prosecutor stepped back a pace and waved his hands for emphasis. He asked, in mock triumph, "Have you ever heard of so-called somatids, Doctor?" Without hesitation, H said,
Well, no. But since I did my medical studies in the English language, I could be ignorant of the term. I seem to recall having seen it somewhere in a French book. I can't recall which.
When next asked about other forms of the 16-stage cycle, also found in patient Langley's blood examination, the surgeon suggested he had never heard of terms ASCII or lyrivids, yeast-like forms, and said categorically that, whatever they were, they would never have been seen in the blood or its cells. About several other forms in the cycle, Hart stated exasperatedly,
I don't know what they could possibly refer to.
And a moment later,
We don't even know what kind of examination Naessens is making here.
People in the court began to wonder after these words came out of the surgeon's mouth. If they don't know, the doctors, then why don't they find out? Before passing something off as worthless, something they have never taken a minute, let alone an hour to investigate, Why don't they take the trouble to look into it? Dr. H's stumbling and fumbling was lost on Chapdelaine, who, in cross-examination, arose to rub salt in the wounds of Hatch's testimony. He asked questions not of blood but about urine analysis, which was also included in Langley's medical file, as performed by Naessens at his microscope. He had the doctor once again admit,
I can't understand the way this is all reported, or what it means. As I said before, I just don't understand the examination and all this.
As the chaplain concluded his cross-examination, he said, "So, Doctor, somatids are not something familiar to you?" Trying to make sure that the jury grasped the idea that the doctor was completely ignorant of Naessens' methods.
Well, there may be some things that can be brought out in blood tests that are not widely known, but we don't bother with them.
Chapdelaine said sarcastically, "Could we be having semantic problems here?"
Well, somatids, as I said, I seem to recall in a book, but we don't use the word hamati. At least not in English. Or acid or liveride. If a liveride infection in the blood is actually possible, they'll take a special exam to detect it.
As the second day of the trial began, de Chapdelaine got right down to business. He cross-examined Hatch again, asking him about his meetings with Madame Langley. He was trying to establish if Madame Langley did indeed have a case of extremely advanced Big C metastases. Did the patient, in fact, have Big C that developed to the point where it had affected the lymph ganglia?
Unequivocally.
This helped de Chapdelaine prove the point that Madame Langley was terminal when she had visited Naessens and was using this treatment as a last-ditch effort. Numerous individuals who had used 714X to treat their conditions testified to its beneficial results and defended Naessens' character, as well as individuals such as former Congressman Berkeley Bedell, who had used a 714X and claimed it helped him and others such as Christian Delatte, President of Development Alternatives Canada, and Ralph Raoul Ireland. After a 10-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than an hour, and came back with the decision that Naessens be acquitted of all charges. After the trial, there was a constant tug-of-war between those in the Canadian government who believed in Naessens and those who did not. But Gaston stayed strong in his belief that his treatment could still help people, and even offered to give the medicine to doctors willing to trial it, giving it to them for free as long as those giving the treatment informed their patients that this was a trial drug. In 1991, Gaston Naessens, for the first time in his life, hosted a scientific conference of his own, held in the remote University of Sherbrooke, Quebec. It attracted some 200 participants from 31 of the 50 states, as well as from Canada, Mexico, the Bahamas, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Austria. In January 1992, Naessens and his microscope were featured in a cover story by the prestigious International Journal of Alternate and Complementary Medicine in the United Kingdom. In May 1992, Naessens and Christopher Bird were invited to speak at an international conference called AIDS, A Different Way, which took place in Amsterdam. Gaston Naessens died on February 16, 2018, in Sherbrooke, Canada at the age of 94. He was the head of the International Academy of Somatid Orthobiology in Rock Forest, Canada, today known as the CERBE Laboratory. Others have continued his remarkable work. His notable anti-Big C product, the 714X, is still available and is used in many countries such as Canada under the condition of Special Access Program. This program was made for patients with terminal illnesses, and is also reported to be in use in Mexico and some Western European countries. If you enjoyed this documentary, please like, share and subscribe, and if you wish to see more, click here to see our documentary on Royal Raymond Rife, or click here to see our documentary on Din Shah Gardiali.